Good morning, and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. A little bit later on in the program, we have Chemung County Sheriff Bill Schramm. He's going to be our guest. We've got a lot of questions for him. We've got a lot of issues to get to. You've probably seen the news by now. Hunter Biden looks like he will be indicted on gun charges. We'll get to that a little bit later on, hopefully. A few things here about his father as well. Also, Trump, Pence, a lot of things, and hopefully we can get to all of it. I thought, though, we'd start off with a quick look at Congressman Nick Langworthy. He was busy yesterday having a session with over 100 farmers and stakeholders in the 23rd Congressional District, specifically in Chautauqua County. He was joined by the House Agricultural Committee Chairman, G.T. Thomas. As a matter of fact, I do have a photo from that. If you look, G.T. Thomas is the gentleman in, I guess you'd say, the tan blazer. So that's a look at some of the people that were being joined the congressman to discuss the farm bill. So, and I have a quote here from the congressman on the event, but he hosted a farm bill listening session, is what it's called, at the Cornell Lake Erie Research and Extension Lab in Portland, with more than 100 farmers, agricultural producers, and other stakeholders in attendance. And I like this, but obviously we are a big agricultural community, so it's always nice to see a focus on this. Here's the quote from the congressman. An effective farm bill is the result of the shared wisdom and collaboration with our hardworking farmers and producers. Western New York and the Southern Tier have rich agricultural heritage and over 6,200 active farmers. That's amazing. It's an honor that so many travel to share their challenges and priorities with us today. I also want to thank Chairman Thomas for taking the time to travel to Chautauqua County to ensure our farmers have a seat at the table, and for his leadership to ensure we get this year's farm bill right. Because of listening sessions like this, we'll have a 2023 farm bill that reflects the needs of our hardworking farmers, supports rural economies, and promotes American agriculture. I can't think of a better idea if you're working on a farm bill than talking to those directly affected by it. And of course, that is the farmers themselves. So I thought I would pass that along to you. I know we have many farmers in our audience. So I received that press release yesterday, and I just wanted to highlight it for all of you. So we do have a lot of national stories that we're going to get to, not a ton of local this morning. As always, you can contact me if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or criticisms. If you have any questions for the sheriff, Bill Schramm, Chemung County Sheriff, feel free to reach out to me before the interview, and we'll try to get to all of those questions. On tomorrow's program, I mentioned this yesterday, but this will be fun. We're going to be talking with Elisa and Sylvia. They've been along for the ride from almost the beginning of this program because they're a part of ASSE, which is an international exchange program. Well, Sylvia, if you recall our last interview together, she was returning home to Italy. Well, we're going to hear from her tomorrow from Italy, and Elisa happens to be there as well visiting. So I think that'll be a fun interview, just something a little bit different to change it up on your Friday. So let's take a short break, and then we'll be back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, please stay with us. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I'm your host, Frank Acom. So I'm not going to say arguably the biggest story, but it is a major story. Hunter Biden, let me put it up on screen. Hunter Biden will be indicted on gun charges later this month, is what's being reported. He will face a new federal grand jury indictment relating to his gun charges by the end of the month. The Speedy Trial Act requires that the government obtain the return of an indictment by a grand jury by Friday, September 29, 2023 at the earliest. The government intends to seek the return of an indictment in this case before that date. That's what Special Counsel David Weiss had to say in a document that was filed in the U.S. District Court for the District of Delaware. Now, the filing was in response to an August 31st oral order by the court for the Justice Department and Biden's lawyers to provide it with a status update on the case, including any steps that they believe the Delaware court needs to take. This will be kind of fascinating to watch, and it goes back to the conversation we had, of course, the sweetheart plea deal that fell through. And it's a great piece, by the way, that I just had up on the screen by Victor Nava. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's at the New York Post. If you want to go back through the history of what led up to this. Now, lawyers for President Biden's scandal-riddled son, is what the article says, submitted their own update shortly after Wise, indicating that the 53-year-old has been following the conditions of a diversion agreement previously reached with federal prosecutors to avoid a felony gun charge. What that diversion agreement was is Biden would have to remain sober, submit to drug testing, avoid committing other crimes for 2 years, and agree not to own a firearm again. Now, of course, there was conversation going way back about the cocaine that was found at the White House, and one of the reasons people thought that the investigation in that ended so quickly is because if it did lead to Hunter, and I'm not saying it would, but if it did lead to Hunter, that changes everything with that diversion agreement and starts to open a whole new can of worms. So that was one of the major concerns. So this is something, and it just complete news here, that I wanted to bring to you and highlight, and I'm sure that we'll be keeping a close eye on this on the program and try to give you any updates on this as we find them out. Now, I do have to take another break, but there's a kind of an interesting piece that ties in with this. There's been questions about, did Joe Biden have business dealings with his son and all that? And then, of course, we heard about these aliases or these fake names and emails that were being used. Well, Andrew McCarthy at the New York Post said that Obama, Clinton, and Biden all used secret fake name email accounts to hide their actions. And this is nothing new. So if we get a chance, we'll bring that up in just a moment when we take a break. I just don't want to run late. Again, feel free to contact me at any point this morning or after the program. I know a lot of people reach out after the program. Maybe they delayed watching it, or maybe they thought of something later on. Feel free. If you are more of a call person and not a text, just leave me a voicemail, if you don't mind. Same as if that's during the live program as well. It should go right to voicemail. I do hear those. I do get to see the transcript of it. So if you're not a texter, that's not a problem whatsoever. So there you go. There's my contact information. Now let's take that break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. Oh, there's the sheriff. Hey, we're going to go. Do you want to go live right on the air right now? We are live. Why not, right? Okay. Perfect. Putting you right on the spot here, right as the street cleaner goes by. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking. This is the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program. That's what's fun about live TV. You never know what's going to happen. Would you mind pulling that microphone up to you just a little bit more?
Sure.
Sheriff, thanks so much for being on the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We've got a lot to talk about, but first let's talk about the Support the Police rally with you and Dr. Coleman.
Yes, October 7th. It's a Saturday from 1 to 2 at Wisner Park in Elmira. I've been a part of several Unity in the Community events with Dr. Coleman. Mm-hmm. He generally runs those with Georgia Verdier from NAACP.
We had her on the program not that long ago.
Oh, very good. Yeah, so they're a great way to connect with the community. Mm-hmm. Great topics.
Yes.
And when he reached out about this one, I was all in, and
of course
honored to co-sponsor it with him.
Yeah, Support the Police rally. When you do one of these rallies, a Unity in the Community, what's the community reaction?
It's usually always positive.
Great.
I don't think we've had any negative interactions at these. Generally, it's always positive. People are, great to be a part of them, and we appreciate the support.
Again, that's at Wisner Park, October 7th from 1 to 2. Of course, it's free and open to the public. So there we go. We've got that. I've got a lot of questions for you this morning. So we talk about Support the Police. Sorry, I put you right on the air. I could have got you water.
No, you're fine. It's my fault.
Yeah.
That bus traffic, I wasn't expecting.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We're back. It's called Support the Police rally, and we've talked about it, you and I, but on this program a lot. whether it's the media, pop culture, is not the friendliest right now to police, and it's unfortunate. Has that been a real problem for you in the sheriff's office with retention and recruitment?
It's been a problem for all law enforcement. You know, I was looking at the stats the other day. In 2017, we had 167 people sign up for the deputy sheriff police officer exam in Chemung County alone. This year, 57.
Wow.
So the problem with that is when you have that small pool of candidates, we have 5 different agencies within Chemung County that are competing for the people on those lists.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of the people that are taking those exams, they're not ready for the physical fitness part of it. So although they're successful in the written part, even if we end up with 57 of them passing the test, the challenge then comes in: can they all pass the physical fitness? And honestly, about a third or more fail that.
Is that right?
You know.
So what's the answer to this? How do you get people to join the sheriff's office?
Well, we do try to do some recruitment stuff, and you know, just get a positive message out there. Keep interacting with the public as best we can in a positive manner. Really encourage those that want to do it to make sure that they're prepared. That there's more than just taking the written test. A lot of these people are younger. They think, well, sit-ups, push-ups, and a mile-and-a-half run is nothing. So I don't think they prepare accordingly.
Yeah, it's not like police academy.
No,
you're not.
No.
You've actually got to come in pretty much in shape.
Ready to go. Yep.
Yeah. So that's very interesting. And I know, as you mentioned, I think last time on the program as well, corrections officers too.
Same with corrections.
Yeah.
You know, they just went to a new method in New York State. They eliminated the written exam.
Okay.
So now it's like an application process, and they basically rate you based on your experience. So currently we have 10 full-time spots open, 14 part-time, and we only have 32 names on the list.
I don't mean to laugh at it, but it's horrible.
No, yeah, it's bad because, you know, they got to get through a background, and some people don't pass that. So, again, our pool of candidates is very limited.
So I want to talk about the campaign, and I will take a short break in just a moment, but you are up for re-election.
I am.
How's the campaign going so far?
It's great when there's no competition. When you're unopposed, it's a lot less stressful.
You should do that every time.
I would like that. That'd be nice.
But I do want to talk about your goals and your plans when we come back. But I'll take a short break. You can stay with us?
Yep, sure.
All right. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, I'm your host, Frank Acom, and this is the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program because we are being joined by Sheriff Schramm. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks again for having me.
Well, there's so much to discuss, and I want to get into some of the actual issues on the street, but you were talking about you're up for re-election, even though it's unopposed. I think you still have goals, right?
Sure.
So what are you looking for in your next term?
Well, again, I think our main priority is getting the staffing that we need.
Right.
We can't serve the public properly if we don't have the people out there, you know, to do the job. So we're working very, very hard on recruitment in both the Road Patrol and the Corrections Division because we feel that's our number one priority. You know, it's tangling with the bail reform. It is still an issue for us. It's still an issue for law enforcement. The same people getting out repeatedly, committing reoffending. They are starting to recruit younger and younger people to do some of these crimes because they raised the age. Yeah. Now we can't charge them as adults until they're 18. So they're recruiting 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids to do some of their dirty work, which just creates a whole nother headache for us. You know, the drugs are still a problem. It's all the things that never seem to go away, but you just try to do the best you can to stay on top of them.
Do you find that you get pushback? People say, well, you know, more needs to be done, but how can we do more with less?
Absolutely.
And with your hands tied by the state.
Absolutely.
That's going to be frustrating.
It's demoralizing for the men and women that are out there doing the job.
Yeah.
They get frustrated arresting the same people over and over.
Yeah.
It's a challenge to keep them encouraged to say, listen, we still have a job to do. We still have to do what we need to do on our end. We can't control the other part of that. So, you know, our people aren't letting up. If there's people need to be arrested, they're getting arrested.
Well, and there's a piece in the New York Post this morning that basically said, when are we all going to learn in the Empire State that we can't just keep letting these maniacs go? Because the idea is, like you said, it's normally repeat offenders. So how many times do we let them be repeat offenders? How many needless victims do there need to be before we wake up?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's why I'm going back to the original question with retention and recruitment, specifically retention. It's got to be, how many people throw up their hands and say, I'm done?
Yeah, or just, why do I want to get in that business?
Yeah.
It's thankless. oftentimes law enforcement's not put in a positive light, so people are hesitant to
Yeah.
commit to this profession.
Yeah, it's horrible, and that leads to more issues with public safety. It's just a vicious circle.
For sure.
So I wanted to talk about, we're going to talk about the pistol permit process. I know a lot of people have been asking me about that. We are going to get to that in just a moment, but I want to keep people hooked. So drug enforcement, we've talked about in the past, really it was opioid epidemic. Now it's just an epidemic in general. What are you seeing on the street? What's being done to combat it?
So the opioid issue is ever prevalent in our society.
Yeah.
The best that we can do is oftentimes, unfortunately, is just respond to the calls that we get. All of our personnel are equipped with Narcan, as are most law enforcement, even our corrections division, in case somebody gets into the facility. So the first part is, hopefully being able to save a life, getting them connected to the services that they need to get away from that, those demons, so to speak. Enforcement as best you can, working collaboratively with our other law enforcement partners to target some of these locations and take the people responsible for getting them out of the game.
And when you mentioned the treatment, how's that work in the jail system? Is there treatment there for the people that come in with this drug problem?
There is, and I often differentiate a correctional facility, a county correctional facility from a state correctional facility as almost like a MASH unit.
Okay.
When somebody comes into a county correctional facility, they got a lot of issues.
Okay.
They're coming straight off the street. They're coming right into that facility with either mental health and/or drug issues. Oftentimes they're going through withdrawal, whether it's alcohol and/or drugs. Our people are on the front line. It takes a while to get them stabilized. Oftentimes, we have to put them on what's called constant watch to make sure that they don't hurt themselves. And here's the downside of bail reform. If you have a person that has those types of addictions and issues, and they come into our facility, we have services and means to get them stabilized, get them into a program, and hook them up with programs once they get out of the facility. If they're in there for hours,
Yeah.
they don't have time to come down from their addictions. They're right back out on the street. Where are they going to go? Right back to
Right
where
back
they
to
were
the drug.
before.
Yeah.
At least there's a side of that with spending some time incarcerated. It gets them, gives them an opportunity, and we're not seeing that anymore.
No, because like you said, if they're in for 2 hours, something like that, 2-3 hours, all they're doing is going back on the street because they've been 2 or 3 hours sober, right?
Exactly.
Sometimes
Sometimes they don't even get sober in that time.
No,
It's just not enough time for them to clear up. We do have, and I think I've mentioned it before on your show, Operation Hope.
Oh, yeah.
It's heroin opioid prevention education. And that's, again, as soon as somebody comes in, every inmate that comes in, or I should say every individual that comes in that's incarcerated, they're assessed. And they identify the issues that they have, and then we treat them accordingly.
And I want to talk about a completely different kind of drug. Marijuana, of course, legalized here in New York State. Have you had a lot of issues with the sticker stores?
It is a never-ending
Right?
sore topic. Listen, if marijuana is legalized, it's legalized. It is what it is. The problem is so many of these sticker stores are operating not so much illegally, but they're not adhering to all the mandates that are in place or should be in
Right.
place. So again, it's passing a law, not having a system in place to hold everybody accountable. The Office of Cannabis Management is minimal as far as personnel for the entire state. A lot of law enforcement is very reluctant to act because the DAs aren't backing them up. They're just, what are we going to do? They're going to, not really be held accountable. And these people are operating, they're not paying sales tax,
No.
state or federal. They're not paying workers' comp like every legitimate business owner
Right.
has to do. They're making money hand over fist, and it's a slap in the face to the legitimate business owner.
Yeah, imagine if you're a bar owner or a restaurant owner and you think of all the hoops you have to jump through for a liquor license legally.
Sure. Yeah.
This would be the almost a public version of a speakeasy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and I know people are talking about it because it's so frustrating because you see them open, they'll be closed down, and then they're open either in a different location or right back again.
It's the same people. They flaunt it.
Yeah.
They park their expensive vehicles out front of their shop so they know
Yeah.
that they have money, and it's I don't know what they're going to do to clamp down on that.
Well, it all goes back to, like you said, New York State wanting to, and we do this all the time, almost virtue signal, right? Like, we did it. We legalized marijuana. Well, there's other states we could have followed their chart. This has been a mess really from day one. Even
Absolutely.
people that I know that supported the legalization of marijuana have now said, wow, we should have waited just a little bit.
Yeah, it's a trend with the state. It's no different than the SAFE Act. It's no different than bail reform. It's no different than the discovery law and every other thing they pass out without having a mechanism in place to have checks and balances.
Right.
Let's push it through to be the first ones to put it out there, and then later see, if it's going to be a problem, and then they find, well, how are we going to clean up this mess?
Yeah.
Well, it's too late.
Do you ever see, going back to bail reform, because it has been such a big issue, but maybe even with the marijuana laws, do you ever see a change coming with that? I mean, does it get to the point where I see Governor Hochul says we've got to, for political purposes, make it look like we're doing something. That doesn't mean your safety, my safety. That just means for political purposes. So will we actually see a change, or will it all be window dressing?
I think it's going to be the window dressing.
Yeah.
I think we were all optimistic that she was going to bring some change to that, and she hasn't done anything that's been, relevant at all.
And you would think, after how well Lee Zeldin did and how many seats they lost in the House because of this, that they would wake up and say, maybe we have a couple jobs as government officials, and one of them is to keep our people safe.
Yeah,
Maybe we should look at it.
Doesn't seem to be the priority now. We're putting the criminals ahead of the citizens, and it's a sad message to send.
It really is. And then you wonder why the criminals are so cocky, really.
They're empowered. They're cocky. We just dealt with two 16-year-olds that were recruited to throw contraband into our rec yard in the jail.
Unbelievable.
We had some information ahead of time, so we were set up for them. We ended up catching them. You would be astonished as to the interaction we had with these young men and how disrespectful they were. And
well, they're untouchable.
Sure.
I mean, at 16 years old, they know it. And why do you think they're being recruited?
Absolutely.
It's just so frustrating. And I guess maybe the most frustrating part of it is that they keep trying to push this message that it's not as bad as you think it is. But we see it with our eyes.
Yeah.
They think we're that dumb.
Exactly. And those of us that are in the business, we know better than anybody because we're seeing it day in and day out. The men and women, like I said earlier, are getting just more and more frustrated. It's the same song and dance. It's the same people, and they just kind of chuckle.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Give me my appearance ticket, and if I don't go to court, even if they issue a warrant, they've got to call them repeatedly, give them all these opportunities to turn themselves in. It's absurd.
I remember in the early days where someone would get out and say, I'm going to do this again, essentially, but thank you to the bail reform laws, because I'm fine. And that was in the city, and it didn't take long for it to come here.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yep.
so frustrating. But let's talk about a different topic, because so many people reached out to me on this. The pistol permit process, and also I know you're not in charge of this, but I want to talk about the ammo and the costs there. So let's start first with something that you can tell us more about, the pistol permit process. Do we know anything?
So, every county operates just a little bit differently. I've overseen our pistol permit process since 2006, so anybody who applies in Chemung County, their application ultimately comes through me. And it is a little bit of a process. It takes a little bit of time. Now there's a mandate that they have to have this firearm safety course, which is very lucrative to those that are in that business to give the course, because, if you're the only show in town, you can basically write your own ticket on how much you charge, and people have to pay it. We get a lot of questions on the recertification. When it first came out, it was every 5 years. It's now changed to every 3 years. That is a state requirement. It has nothing to do with the county agencies. So we just try to encourage people to get on the state website, navigate through that. That's their requirement. It's not ours. And then, on top of it, now they're charging fees for ammo. They're doing background checks for ammo. They're charging more fees for, gun purchases and these things. Those are all state mandates. Those are mostly going to go through the dealers themselves. But it's frustrating. Personally, I think what they're trying to do is, if we can't totally eliminate gun owners, lawful gun owners, from owning guns, we're going to make it so inconvenient and painful for them that they're not going to want to do it. Right. I hope people don't, I hope people hang tough and stick with it, and hopefully things get better.
Well, it is overwhelming, the process.
Oh, it is.
So it's very easy when people's busy lives to say, I don't have the time to dedicate to this, and I think you're right.
Money.
Yeah, or the money.
Yeah.
And I think it gets to a point where they're just not going to go for it, and that was the ultimate goal.
Right.
And then you add all, like you said, all these costs now on ammunition, and more guns. And going back to what we were saying about always coddling the criminals aren't paying that extra tax. I mean, they're not
going
through
the background check. They're not worried about going to get certified. They're just getting guns and doing their thing.
I know. It just goes back to the law-abiding citizen always suffers in that. So you're saying that the best way to start the pistol permit process is to go to the state website, or should they?
Well, no, that's just for the recertification.
That's for the
So if people are looking to get pistol permit, whatever county you are in, just contact your sheriff's office.
Okay.
Ask them about the process. They'll walk you through it. We happen to have also not only Chemung County residents that we deal with, but we have a reciprocating agreement with Bradford and Talbot County, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
To kind of, we're so close to the border, it's just makes it a little bit more user friendly. All three of the sheriffs are on board with one another.
That's great.
So if you're a Chemung County resident and you want a pistol permit in Pennsylvania, you go through Bradford or Talbot County, PA. It's very smooth, and same with the, those residents down there that come up to us.
And that's great because convenience too,
It
when you
is.
think about it, because you don't want to accidentally make that mistake.
Listen, I live 2 miles away from the border.
Yeah.
If I'm a police officer, so I'm okay, but if I'm just a citizen who has a permit here, I drive up to the Dandy to get gas, and I have my gun on me, I'm technically in violation.
Yeah.
So this way they don't have to worry about it. They're covered in both states.
That's great. So before we go, we were talking about that you're running for re-election, the best possible way to run for re-election.
Yeah.
When you look back at your time in the sheriff's office, what have been the major changes, and how has it been so far?
So I started my law enforcement journey in 1989 when I went through the police academy. I was hired with the sheriff's office in 1990. When I started, we were still using electric typewriters. We were dispatching ourselves out of the sheriff's office. It was well before we had a 911 center. Just equipment and technology has changed so much during my career. Certainly the laws have changed. I think the perception of law enforcement has changed, and unfortunately for the negative. And technology, as good as it can be, it can also be a major problem, unfortunately, with distracted drivers with, handheld devices, and people are we're just in a society or in a mindset that we can't be without our phone within the first second. Even if we're driving, we have to know what's going on. And, so you see a lot of negative consequences because of that.
So that's interesting to think of how much the laws have changed. How do you even at some point keep up with them?
I know.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we rely on either the district attorney's office
Sure.
to send us guidance, or fortunately for us, we have a very strong sheriff's association in New York State. So every week we have a weekly Zoom New York State Sheriff's Association meeting, and it's offered up to every sheriff in the state. We generally get between 40 and 50 sheriffs to join every week.
Oh, wow.
And these are attorneys that run it, that represent us, and they're always keeping us up to date on all the new stuff that's coming down the pike.
Well, that's great. Well, we're just about out of time here. So right before we go to the break, I want to mention this one more time. Unity in the Community. Support the police rally, Wisner Park, October 7th, 1 to 2 p.m. Absolutely free. It's going to be a great event.
Yes, please
So
come.
everybody come out. Is there anything we can do to help your campaign? I have to ask.
No, just if you're in Chemung County, it's still I still appreciate the vote, even
Yeah.
though I don't have an opponent. I really appreciate the support.
Great. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. Let's do it again soon, okay?
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and I'm going to thank the Sheriff, Bill Schramm, again for being on the program. I know he's running unopposed, which is always nice. If you decide to run for office, I'd recommend highly doing it unopposed. But if you want to find out more about his campaign and what his goals are, it's Bill Schramm for Sheriff, for the number. Bill Schramm for Sheriff.com. We appreciate him being on the program. How frustrating does it get? I'm not going to get on a tangent here, but how frustrating does it get when you hear about bail reform and what this does? I had mentioned, actually, this will tie in pretty good. I still do not know how to say this gentleman's name, and I feel bad because he is technically running for president of the United States. Doug Burgum, right? I think that's how you say it. That is not the right one, though. I got the two articles mixed up. But the one article I saw on the New York Post this morning was, why do we keep letting these maniacs go? And it was focused on New York City. If you're ever online for any amount of time, if you're a social media user, you'll see these just heartbreaking and disgusting videos of someone just randomly sucker punching an elderly person or beating up on an innocent bystander. And it gets really, it's one of the reasons why public safety was such a major issue in the last election. So this was actually from Rafael Manguel. I'm sorry, I knew there was two interesting articles that were completely unrelated, and I got the two mixed up. But it is, when are people finally going to say enough to our justice system letting these maniacs go? And they go through and talk about some of the videos that perhaps you've seen in the past where you say, I don't even know how to describe it. I don't like watching those things. I'm sure many of you have the same feeling. But breaks your heart at one point, and then it makes you very angry that those people, the person who just randomly attacked somebody, is going to be back out in the streets in hours. And by hours, that may be too long of a time, if I'm being honest. So it says here, unfortunately, the reality is this: rarely will heinous crimes be committed by individuals with no criminal history. The fact of the matter is that whether we're talking about shoplifting or homicide, crime is driven disproportionately by repeat offenders who've made their commitment to violating the law or their inability to comply with it for reasons of severe mental illness quite clear. Sure, if left alone, they may eventually desist, but who wants to wait that long? Until we recommit to the principle, expect the blows to keep on coming again and again and again. And I mentioned with the sheriff, Governor Hochul saying something to the extent is we have to focus on public safety because it cost us the majority in the House last time. No, the answer should be we have to focus on public safety because we should be worried about the citizens of New York State. But it seems like, and I should have asked the sheriff's department must be terrified every time Albany's in session to see what new crazy law is going to come out that coddles the criminal and ties the hands of law enforcement. It must just be, not just because it's their job, but also they see daily the consequences. I mean, to hear those stories about 16-year-olds being involved in this because they can't get in any trouble, I mean, that was inevitable. You don't want to even say it was an unintended consequence. That would obviously be a consequence. So they're getting recruited by, I don't know if you want to say gangs or just bad actors in general. Hey, you're 16, you go do this, and you're not going to get in any trouble. And we end up getting what we want in the end, whatever that may be. So I'm not saying this to discourage people to get from getting into law enforcement. I wish more people get in law enforcement. We need more police officers, especially with the public safety issues that we're seeing in New York State. Now, will Governor Hochul address it seriously and not from a political standpoint? I don't think so, because we saw at the end of the session her reforms on bail reform that, again, to use the term twice in one show, but it was window dressing. It was just so she could go out and say, we're really trying for you, hoping to dupe voters into believing that she's a strong public safety advocate. And that, again, having to do with elections, not for any other reason. So no substance there, just political spin, political PR. And that is almost just as maddening as the laws are passing, thinking that it's not about you and I and our public safety and our safety in general. And obviously, people, we learn, businesses and people leaving the state because they're scared for, well, their business or losing too much money, or they're scared for their or their family's safety. And if you're already paying the taxes that we pay in New York State, you already have all the expensive things in New York State, like the taxes, whatever, you name it. And then on top of that, you're worried about your safety. At what point do you say enough's enough? At one point do you say, well, we have no freedom here, we're paying too much money, and now we're not even safe in our own homes or in our own neighborhoods? It leads so many people. That's why we're seeing these mass exodus every year to leave the state. All right, I promise you I want to get on a tangent, and that was indeed a tangent. So let's take a short break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, please stay with us. Thank you again for joining us here on Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV. Big Fox broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I'm your host, Frank Acom. President Biden getting some pushback. He was at that Medal of Honor ceremony where, even though he was around Jill, who tested positive for COVID, he took off his mask and was around, I guess, an elderly man. I don't necessarily like that word, but an elderly veteran. That got some pushback, and then he left like right after, I guess, putting the medal on. So they asked the press secretary, why the early exit? Why leave? It seemed disrespectful. Many veterans saying it was disrespectful. He left as planned, she said, as it was planned. He left when there was a pause in the program in order to minimize the close contact with attendees who are about to participate in a reception. Do you believe that was a part of the schedule? Some people have wondered if he just wandered off scenario. We've got to put this all in context. We planned for the president to leave when there was a pause in the program so that it would minimize him being in that room. He did just that. And I also would want to add that before the event started, the president spent a good amount of time with the captain, Captain Taylor, and his family. And everybody was masked because he wanted to spend that quality, important time. Fox News contributor Joe Concha said Biden was in close contact with people while maskless for the entire ceremony to that point. The way this press secretary continues to insult the intelligence of anyone above a 50 IQ is breathtaking. So getting pushback there. So Biden very purposefully abandoned a Medal of Honor recipient on stage before the ceremony was over, meaning the situation was as bad, if not worse, than it looked. Well, I didn't want to spend too much time on that. I know there's a lot of outlets talking about this, a lot of places you can go, but it leads into this mask debate because it seems to be making a comeback that we've got to start wearing masks. I guess Fauci weighed in on it, saying we might want to go back to masks, some universities and others. And I've heard from so many people that said, no, enough is enough when we brought this up before. J.D. Vance has a piece at Fox News. We must stop mask mandates before Biden and Democrats force them on us again. Now, J.D. Vance is a senator from Ohio. It's a really good piece. There's also one by Miranda Devine saying masks don't work against COVID-19 and Dr. Fauci should stop talking. All right, we got to take another short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We do have to take one more break before we wrap things up on today's edition of Frankly Speaking. I want to mention this just quickly. If you've been on any news type websites or watching the news, the big talk has been about Mitch McConnell. And obviously he's had a few of those issues recently with those pauses or whatever you want to call them. And obviously you worry about his health when you see it. It's not something anybody likes to see, but now you're starting to see in the media the calls for him to resign, calls for Republicans to basically boot him out. Again, well, I'm not going to get into the comparison with Feinstein because I think they're not comparable. But on Neil Cavuto's show on Fox News, Markwayne Mullin, he's a Republican from Oklahoma, senator. He was asked, do you have confidence that McConnell can serve in the role as Republican leader in the Senate? So this again, Senator Mullin, I do. I have had multiple conversations with him. Some things we agree on, some things we don't. But his competency level has always been very high, from speaking on the floor to speaking in the conferences. He will be speaking to the party here in just about an hour. We have scheduled lunch together, and every time I've spoken with him, he's been very clear and very precise on what he's talking about. I think there's some other health issues going on with it, but neurology isn't necessarily one of them. And this is the point that I bring up here before we go to break. And it's kind of funny that the media is focusing so much on Mitch McConnell. At the same time, we have a president that gets lost every time he's at a podium. And so you have to have the conversation about both. But I will tell you, one person that did get a clean bill of health was Senator McConnell. So dig there on president, but it is a good point if you look at it from the media coverage standpoint. Who gets more coverage, McConnell or Biden when it comes to health issues? Who actually got more coverage when it came to Trump? Remember the focus on that slow walk up the steps at West Point, or the ramp, I should say, or demanding a cognitive test that he took, not demanding the same from our current president. Just interesting. But it all boils down to what I've talked about numerous times on this program, is that sort of media bias, or where the media focuses on. All right, we do have to take a break. Stay with us. This is our last break. Then we're going to wrap things up quickly here on Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Wrapping things up here, I wanted to mention, by now you've probably heard, a lawsuit is seeking to bar Trump from the primary in Colorado. citing Constitution's insurrection clause. This is coming from the Associated Press. A liberal group on Wednesday filed a lawsuit to bar former President Donald Trump from the primary ballot in Colorado, arguing he is ineligible to run for the White House again under a rarely used clause in the U.S. Constitution aimed at candidates who have supported a, and I quote, insurrection. You know what I think this will do for the country? I don't think this is healthy. I think it plays right into the notion of what the former president says on a regular basis, I should say, about the system being used against him, right? Jonathan Turley, who we quote quite a bit, he's a George Washington University law professor. He said earlier this month in regards to these lawsuits and these talks of the 14th Amendment. He said the amendment was written to deal with those who engage in an actual rebellion, causing hundreds of thousands of deaths. Advocates would extend the reference to, quote, insurrection or rebellion to include unsupported claims and challenges involving election fraud, meaning that that's really what is being charged here. That's what the former president was doing, unsupported claims and challenges to the vote. Not, as Turley says here, the reference to insurrection or rebellion. Turley added that he views the disqualification clause theory as, quote, not simply dubious, but dangerous. According to these advocates, Trump can be barred from the ballot without any charge, let alone a conviction of insurrection or rebellion. So we are out of time already for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Boy, that went very fast. I want to thank, again, did you happen to see Mike Pence? You can find a few articles on that this morning, but blasting Trump's approach as populism over conservatism, in a blistering speech, really trying to differentiate himself from his former boss, saying that there's kind of a MAGA wing that is going to destroy the Republican Party. The populist wing is what he's saying, as compared to the conservative wing, and that's really somewhat the avenue in our campaign that Nikki Haley is going down as well. Okay, now I'm out of time. Was a while ago. Thank you to Chemung County Sheriff Bill Schramm for being our guest this morning. I really appreciate him being on the program. He mentioned the Unity in the Community rally coming right up. I know it's 1 month from today, but that month's going to go fast. It's Unity in the Community. Support the Police rally at Wisner Park on October 7th from 1 to 2 p.m. It's absolutely free, of course. No tickets required, open to the public, and the sheriff will be there. Dr. Coleman will be there. So appreciate Sheriff Schramm being on the program, and we had so much to talk about. So it was nice to catch up on some of those questions. And thank you to people that reached out and said, please talk about the pistol permit process. Because I know there's a lot of questions there. There's also questions about the ammunition. That does not go through, the fee on ammunition. That does not go through the sheriff's office. But obviously he's knowledgeable on the situation and can fill us in. So really appreciate it. Now have a great day, everyone. We'll be back tomorrow morning starting at 7 a.m. for Frankly Speaking right here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, as I mentioned, Elisa and Sylvia, our old guests from before, that we've had on a few times. They're going to be calling in from Italy. So just to get a little catch up, just a short little interview. So I hope that you'll tune in tomorrow starting at 7 for Frankly Speaking. Have a great day, everyone. I look forward to tomorrow already.